today, I'm going to share a little bit about my own journey over the last couple of years. I want to talk more about my own white stone words, right? So last Sunday we wrote down our white stone words, and I want to talk a little bit about that. If you missed last week's lesson, all of us who were here participated in this ceremony where we go within and we connect with our highest self to kind of intuit a power word for the year ahead. And if you're new to this community, you may not know what goes on in my life outside of here, but I do want to talk a little bit about my journey, because some of the things that I have learned are going to be relevant for someone else. I just know that. But first, let me just say this. Several weeks ago, and you might not know this, but I have to give my talk titles to Lori and Ellen and Randy and all these people who do things with them. I have to do them weeks in advance, right? And so I selected my talk title, Hand in Hand. And I was planning to talk about the truth that our philosophy, the science of mind, is for everyone. You know, wherever you are in life and wherever you are in your journey towards spiritual intelligence, what I know is that using these principles is a very good idea, you know, no matter what you're facing in life. And the reference, hand in hand, actually refers to something Ernest Holmes used to say all the time when he explained that religion and science walk hand in hand. Religion and science are supportive of each other. And we kind of talked about that in our class Wednesday night for those of you who were here. So the truth is that whenever you're facing a challenge in your life, whenever something's going on, it's advisable to turn to spiritual wisdom, but to turn also to the scientific and natural intelligence that's available to you as well. You know, there's great wisdom in exploring this concept of oneness, that religion and scientific principles work together to manifest a demonstration in your life, meaning to solve a problem in your life, and they do that hand in hand. So he often used this example of healing, especially physical healing, because back when this philosophy was written, the world was coping with great challenges with physical health issues, namely tuberculosis, because there was no cure for that. And so many people were looking to some spiritual remedies because science wasn't really providing that. And this New Thought teaching was about combining all the scientific remedies, using all of that as well, but combining it with spiritual principles and working toward better health by relieving your thoughts and false beliefs about illness in your body and stuff like that, changing your thoughts. So with both religious practice and scientific medical practice working hand in hand, healing was a greater possibility. And we know that, and science and medicine does that today too. There were many great demonstrations of healing tuberculosis, which was really drawing a lot of people to these kinds of teachings back then. So a few weeks ago when I was planning my talk, that's what I was going to talk about. But after prayer and meditation this week, I decided instead that I'm going to talk more about my own personal journey of working with spiritual principles and working with the natural laws and perspective to kind of change my life. And it all started with a white stone word I wrote in January of 2019. So if you were back with us back then, in January 2019, you know that we as a community were working diligently. We were working diligently to secure a new home for our center, this place. We've just spent the month of December 2018 fundraising and getting ready, and we formed a committee to locate a building. And as I crossed the threshold into this new year, I previously shared that I wrote this word on my white stone. What was I thinking, right? Transformation. I wrote it on my stone, and I sincerely thought that I was choosing that word on behalf of the entire community, because I knew we were going to transform in 2019. It was written on the wall, basically, not even on a rock. It was written on the wall, because we were moving into a new building. We were changing from being church in a box, where we just showed up in a building, you know, on Sunday and then boxed everything back up, and that building was used for something else during the week, and then we would show up again. And we went from that to having this 24/7 home. We also changed our name that year. We changed our name from Suncoast Center for Spiritual Living to the Center for Spiritual Living Tampa Bay, because it just, quite frankly, made more sense. And we started a children's program. We did a lot of things in 2019 as a community to change. So I knew we were going to transform as a group. But I had no idea that I was calling forth, I was working with spiritual principle to call forth a transformation in my own life. So over the course of 2019, if you weren't on this journey with me, I partnered with Spirit to bring my 13-year marriage to an end that year. I sold 2 homes. I moved to an apartment here in Tampa. My life totally changed as the structures that I had built over many years dissolved over and over again. I just kept surrendering to Spirit and asking for wisdom and guidance. And it was tempting to feel the human sense of failure, as I'm sure you can imagine, because no one goes through those kinds of changes without great stress and emotional challenges, and I really was no exception, right? So thankfully, I had a robust spiritual practice. I had a lot of ministerial colleagues around me, supporting me in counsel and prayer. I had deep friendships to sustain me. Some of them are in this room. And I had this whole spiritual family to kind of hold me gently as I navigated all of this change. But even with all of that support and wisdom around me, it was not an easy year. And sometimes I felt like I was floundering. Anybody relate? Ever floundered in your life? Okay. So I reminded myself, so how did I deal with it? I reminded myself that this is a natural occurrence. So think about it. Here's the deal. We spend some chapters of our lives building structures, don't we? We build relationships, we build careers, we build financial plans and health regimes and families and traditions and routines and all those kinds of things, those structures that hold our lives. But we also know scientifically that all form, even the great mountain on the hillside, all form goes through change and only stays for a time. And that being scientifically true, we also spend some chapters of our lives watching our structures change and collapse. Relationships and careers end, and friendships kind of give way to different needs, and families morph into different patterns. Health changes as we age. Educational journeys naturally come to graduation, and we move and everything seems to change. Traditions get broken and routines and fall apart, and all those things happen naturally. It's a part of the natural process of life. Seasons come for growing and seasons come for harvesting, and then that season comes when the field gets plowed under and all the structures get returned to the earth. Think about it. Trees grow big and then suddenly trees fall. Everything evolves and changes. But when it happens in our lives, we can become unglued, right? Sometimes we see the collapse coming, right? Sometimes we know it's going to happen, and sometimes we do not. I did not see all the changes of 2019 coming. I'm thankful that I had that scientific perspective of forms changing naturally, and I was grateful to have my spiritual wisdom working hand in hand. But did those things prevent me from feeling failure? From feeling things? No. I felt it all. I felt the disappointment, and as I said, I felt that sense of failure. And so as I was writing that all about this week, I get an email every day called the Daily Om. I don't know if any of you get it, but I get it. And I actually read it occasionally. And when you get anything on a daily basis, it's hard to read it every day. But at any rate, here comes one this week, and it says, literally, let's talk about the word failure for a second. And it said, at some point, the word may not have been so loaded with the weight of negativity, and it simply referred to something that did not go according to plan. Unfortunately, in our culture, it is often used very negatively, such as when a person is labeled a failure, even though it is impossible for something so vast and subtle as a human being to be reduced in such a way. It also acts as a deterrent, scaring us from taking risks for fear of failure. It has somehow come to represent the worst possible outcome. Failure is a word so burdened with fearful and unconscious energy that we can all benefit from consciously examining our use of it, because the language we use influences the way we think and feel. Amen, sister, whoever wrote that, right? So next time you feel like a failure or you fear failure, know that you are under the influence of an outmoded way of perceiving that word. When the word failure comes up, it's a call for us to apply a more enlightened consciousness to the matter at hand. But I did feel failure. I felt the judgment. I still feel it sometimes, because there were lots of people who did not want my structures to change and shift and end. But I kept my faith, and I kept walking. Even when I didn't know how I could, I did. It was definitely a transformational year for me. But somehow it ended. Somehow 2019 actually ended. And I gratefully crossed into 2020. And I gravely wrote the word love on my next white stone a year ago. So a year ago I wrote the word love. And I set this spiritual practice for myself of writing down how love showed up for me every single day. And many new people came into the center actually that year. And I was following my divine guidance to be that love, to share love, to spread love here in this community. Some of you are those people that started coming here in 2020. I hope you felt my intention of love. And I also opened up my heart to attract a new partner in life. And let me just tell you something. Dating is an interesting journey, especially when you're a minister, but I was determined to keep myself open and trust Spirit on that journey. And as the early weeks of the year went by, love showed up in a big way for me. If you were here in that first Sunday in March for my ordination weekend, that was powerful. It was a lot of love coming, flooding right at me. And then love showed up in a crazy way with the arrival of COVID a week later. So as isolation became my reality, how was I going to focus on my word love, right? But I made this solemn intention to love myself through it, right? So Ellen and Lori and I formed a team. And we came in here and we figured out how to produce this pandemic Sunday service pattern. And I allowed them to teach me and love me and show me how to do this technology. It was so scary for me. And that inspired me. And I went on and I took some other classes. And I love myself by investing in my own education about technology as a minister. I took a couple of courses actually, because I knew I would never have that kind of time to invest in myself like that. So I showed up in that way to love myself. And then love showed up in May as my little Maisie, my little precious Maisie, came home as the new puppy in my life. And you've seen him in the pandemic portraits. You can see her out there. She's pretty awesome. Many of you have met her and experienced the little bundle of love that she is, and she's a handful, trust me. She was even a handful this morning, actually. She knew I was going to talk about it. And then in the late spring, love showed up in the form of a friend, recrossing my path after I had known her casually for a couple of years. So Terry and I spent the rest of 2020 kind of solidifying our loving connection, and we're now living together. And some of you have met her, and others of you will meet her soon. So it was indeed a year of love. It was a love for me, and I believe my white stone intention was a powerful part of the attraction of those things into my life. I combined my understanding of how life worked on a natural and scientific level with spiritual practice, and I kept moving forward for all of 2020. So you might be curious as to what my white stone was from last Sunday, right? It was reclamation. What that means, as you can imagine, is that I am in the process of reclaiming myself as I enter this chapter that naturally comes after the structures fall. The next chapter is rebuilding structures that I spoke about. So I'm sorting through all the patterns and choices from my past. I'm carefully selecting, what do I want to reclaim? What do I want to put back into this new expression of myself? So as I've said, I've already reclaimed my love of dogs by getting Maisie. I've reclaimed my identity as a homeowner. I'm diving more deeply into the greater organization again. Some of you may know that I was working for the bigger organization of CSL, and then I pulled back, and now I'm diving back into that. And I'm in the beginning phase of kind of reclaiming other qualities and habits that have supported me in this past year. And so as I keep my gratitude journal at the end of the night, at the end of every week, I'm making a list of what I've reclaimed. I'm kind of putting my flag on those things and reclaiming them into my life. So the most important lesson that I've learned over these past 2 years is to be very careful as to the meaning I give to anything that happens in my life. And I want to share that lesson with you. I want to share these things because I am not unique. I'm not unique. I'm living a life very similar to yours. You're going to have things that happen in your life that seem random or punitive or confusing. You're going to question the cause of things, just like I did. You're going to ask questions like, did I cause this? Am I being punished somehow? Am I somehow failing? What was in my consciousness that put these events in motion? If you've been around New Thought, that's what you're going to ask. Why is this happening? What meaning can I give this? Because we as human beings are meaning makers. We get to decide what things mean and how things happen. And there's a great responsibility in that, because how we choose to think creates the quality of our lives is one of our principles. You know, if we label something as bad, we're going to vibrate at that level. If we label something as growth or simply change, then we're going to vibrate at a different level. But if we can label something as a blessing, then that takes us to the level of gratitude, which is a very, very high vibration. And it impacts us in powerful ways, how we label things. So I want to share a Taoist parable with you to illustrate an important point. And it goes like this. During a time of great drought, a Taoist, it makes a difference. A Taoist master was asked by members of a village if he could bring rain to their dry fields. They confessed trying many other approaches before reaching out to him, but with no success. So the master agreed to come, and he asked for a small hut with a garden that he could tend. For 3 days he tended the garden, performing no special rituals or asking anything further from the villagers. And on the 4th day, rain began to fall on the parched villagers. When asked how he had achieved such a miracle, the master answered that he was not responsible for the rain. However, he explained, when he came to the village, he had sensed some disharmony within himself and within the village. And each day, as he tended to the garden, he returned a little more to his highest self. And when he returned to balance, the rain came naturally. So what does this story mean? What happens when you return to balance? Things start happening naturally in your favor in life. Carl Jung, the great psychologist Carl Jung, loved this story because he felt that it illustrated his own understanding about how we can connect with the collective consciousness. When we connect with the whole, parallel events can occur, such as what happened in the story with the rain falling. Jung called these occurrences synchronicity, which is a principle that says the inner attitude of the person cannot be separated from the events taking place in the world. However, Jung made a point of saying that synchronicity does not mean causality. Doesn't mean causality. Outer events can mirror our internal world of thoughts and emotions. And there's a very thin veil separating us from universal consciousness, from the oneness, right? Very thin veil. Our opportunity is to believe that this veil can be lifted and awaken a sense of connection. When we awaken a sense of connection, it's kind of like reinvigorating your arm after it's fallen asleep. You've ever fallen asleep on your arm and it just kind of goes dead, right? You've had that experience. You know, one time I had my arm fell so dead asleep, it was like crossed like this. I had to literally pick it up with my other hand and pick it up, right? It was so dead and cold, and I had to shake it. So connecting to spirit is kind of like that. In class on Wednesday, we talked about our connection to spirit. And when we wake up to the connection, we are no longer passive passengers in our own lives. We participate in the making of meaning of the things that are happening around us. We participate in the synchronicity of life. So does the parable of the Taoist master represent a symbol of the awakened mind? A person who's restored circulation between himself and the universe? If this is the case, we got to consider anew the synchronistic attitude toward life. Because we can restore balance and meaning in ourselves, and when we do, we seed the world around us with hope and purpose. In our teaching, we see you and your life as an expression of God. Your unity with the energy of all life is either activated in your life or it's lying dormant and asleep like your arm. Your arm's still attached, but it's just not working right. You're called to this higher state of consciousness and action in your word. But you got to shake yourself awake. So hopefully you were here last week. I hope you were here last week and you chose a white stone word for yourself. If you weren't here, then I invite you to take the time to do that for yourself. You can watch the recorded talk and the ceremonies on there and everything and get a word for the year. It's not too late. It's only, the 10th? So you've got time. And then I invite you to wake up to your connection to the divine. Just like this Taoist master, begin to do whatever it takes to rebalance yourself with the word that you've written down. My thought is that the word you wrote down is something that you want, or something that is either missing from your life or you want more of it, right? So how can you use that and use what you know about science and spirituality to rebalance yourself in such a way that you awaken the synchronicity of the universe to manifest your word? Just as I looked at nature to evaluate my understanding of the seasons in life, is there a way for you to see if nature illustrates your chosen word? Think about the word you chose last week. If your word is peace, how does nature show up as peace? If your word is gratitude, how does nature or the universe express gratitude naturally? What are the natural laws that govern your word? And similarly, if your word is blocked in nature, what blocks it? And how does nature unblock it? How does it rebalance itself or move an interruption of the flow of whatever your word is? What does science teach you about the quality you desire in your experience this year? And how can you bring science hand in hand with spirituality? Are there writings about your word from Ernest Holmes himself? Or do religious teachings illustrate your word? What do they say about the subject? Are there modern day writers talking about your subject? You know, most of the words that have been shared with me, that some of you shared with me last week, are clearly the subject of books and TED Talks and lessons. So Google it. Google your word and see what you find, because it'll be amazing how much you can learn about it. Here's a really cool idea. If you would like for me to do a talk about your word, I would love to do that. Challenge me to it. Send me your word. Send me an email and ask me to explain your word. And I would love to kind of rise to that request. I can even give you credit, right? Because my stories should not be the only ones that illustrate principle and scientific truth and spiritual law. So my invitation to you is to pick up a copy of the Science of Mind magazine, the one that Brittany read a reading from. You know, in the first few pages of every issue is a page called What We Believe. Read that page. Read that page. Study those sentences and begin to prove these principles for yourself. Let those words speak to you about how to live in closer relationship with Spirit this year as you live the year you've set forth in your intention. You know, the magazine actually has daily wisdom and messages. When I picked it up today, today's message was just for me, so you can borrow it, but it was for me. It was actually about this talk too. So use your beliefs. Use your beliefs to return your inner life to better balance. In doing so, you're going to be enchanted by God, and your life will be an example of synchronicity, but only you can give your life that meaning. So your white stone, what I know is your white stone word, that experience of that is waiting for you just around the corner. So allow the synchronicity of life to just delight you in 2021. And I hope this community gathers around you to support you in having that experience. So please join me in reading our one-sentence affirmation today. Today, I align myself with universal truth as I purify my heart and balance my inner life and give my experiences meaning. And so it is.
So it is.